Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our panel discussion introducing the Social Value Ideas Factory. We're hosted live on location here at Patch Gloucester and filmed as part of Business Insights podcasts and multimedia. We're discussing aspects of driving Gloucestershire investment, and our panelists are representing local organisations and some key players in the business community. Our panelists today talking about what social value looks like in practice and how the newly formed Social Value Ideas Factory can support sector collaboration. And the panel that I've got today here, I'm very pleased to say, are Claire Thayers, who's a CSR and social value consultant from Claire Thayers and Associates, Jack Kidder, responsible business manager for Henry Boot, Michaela Pearson, social value consultant and partnership lead for Samtala, and Paloma Strelitz, head of product and creative director for Patch. And I'm Sarah Briers. I'm a freelance communication strategist. So welcome to you all. And let's crack on. I wanted to just say that I know I'm really looking forward to all the perspectives that we're going to hear from our panel, but also from the audience. So I know it's going to stimulate lots of thoughts, lots of questions. And so we're going to make sure we have time for questions from those of you that are here in the audience too, in a little while. But what I'd really like to do, just to start with, is actually just to share a little bit of a definition, perhaps, so that we're all on the same page about what we're talking about when we're saying social value. What does that really mean? And maybe set it within the context of today's broader discussions on investment into Gloucestershire. So Claire, can you start us off with how would you simply define social value?
So don't laugh, but I had to write it down. I've been doing it for so long. I thought, no, I can't just second guess it. I need to actually use a proper definition. So forgive me for reading this, but it's important. So social value is the positive impact an organisation has on society beyond its financial profits. So it's focusing on the well-being of people and the environment, and it encompasses the contribution made to improve the community welfare, sustainability, and overall quality of life. So I hope that definition puts it all into context and why the Social Value Ideas Factory was created.
Absolutely, that's really helpful. But I think what's also really good for us, and so much of I think what today is about, is understanding what that looks like in practice. So I'd love to invite each of you actually just to share a little thought from your perspective. Maybe tell us a bit more about your role and how it relates to social value. But also, can you give us an example of, for you, what does social value look like in practice? Jack.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Jack. I work for HBD, which is the developer behind the Golden Valley. You can probably tell from my dulcet northern tones that I am not a local, but I have really come to fall in love with Gloucestershire in the time that we've been preparing Golden Valley, and we are now just starting the project, so an exciting time. For me, social value quite simply is an investment in communities, and that can be through a myriad number of ways, but ultimately it's about trying to, as you're building and developing commercial projects, how are you making life better for the people living in and around those projects? And so sometimes I think the challenge with social value is it can be very data driven. It can be about numbers on spreadsheets, and I mean, you have to report credibility, but for me the real impact is when you see an individual that has gone and had a really positive experience because of the actions of your scheme. That could be the child that comes on a site visit and you can see the glint, the spark in their eye there where they go, I didn't know I could do that, but maybe I can now. Sometimes it's not even things you're doing, it's connecting other people. So it's seeing, one of the privileges of being an outsider here initially, I definitely don't feel like that now, is seeing how many amazing things happen in this part of the world. And actually the privilege we have has been able to connect them up sometimes. So yeah, social value is all about human impact.
Great, thank you. Absolutely. Michaela.
Hi, so I'm Michaela and I am a social value consultant and partnerships lead at Samtala, which is a social value agency. And a lot of the work that we do is supporting clients to do good in their business for the well-being of the community. That kind of sums up what we do. And I've got a great example in terms of social value. I was speaking to a friend of mine yesterday, and he was speaking about my role and what I do. And he was like, oh, it doesn't really apply in what I do here as a general manager at this venue. So he started speaking about his work and what he's embedded within his organization. And he's like, yeah, I've cut out kind of the young people in hospitality, just paying them the minimum wage. He's like, I'm now paying them what they're worth. He's like, yeah, we started doing some work experience for young disabled people in the community. He's like, we're trying to cut down the hours that they're working, especially in events. It's really long hours. And I was like, do you know everything that you're just doing there? It's social value. So as much as you're saying it doesn't really apply to what you're doing, it is social value. And off the back of that, they're seeing that staff are more happy. So events are running more smoothly. They're having to do less refunds back to the clients because the staff are happy. So, if you're embedding this within your organization and you're looking after the stakeholders, your community, the staff that are working for you, it's going to also support your business. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example, actually, of how it's not just about labels and definition, it's the actual work that's happening through good business. Paloma.
Hi, I introduced myself earlier. I'm the head of product and creative director for Patch. And I actually think lots of these descriptions have resonated, but I love this word embeddedness. So something that we talk about at Patch is the ecosystem flywheel. So we combine publicly accessible meeting room and event spaces alongside co-working for freelancers and solopreneurs and offices for startups and SMEs and scale-ups. And the reason we talk about the ecosystem flywheel is that we want to be the place for people to come locally if you want to build a successful business. We're part of a successful business ecosystem. And that means creating authentic opportunities at every single layer of how you might experience Patch. So you might be a person coming in for a one-off workshop, but through that experience, you've developed, new connections, genuine insight, access to ideas or resources that you might not be familiar with. And that kind of flows through to the founder and team of a really successful local SME who has a base, a Patch, and who's building their business locally, who's obviously, by dint of doing that, contributing opportunity locally through employment, through economic investment. And we kind of try as hard as we can, as much as we can, to think about what can we be doing at every single kind of part of that flywheel in order to create a richer experience for everyone who might be entering our environment or engaging with us.
Yeah, brilliant. Alive and well social value on this panel. So Claire, you're one of the founders of the Social Value Ideas Factory. So tell us, what is it? How did it come about, and what's the need for it?
For my sins, I'm very old. I've been around the block a few times. So I've worked in packaging design. I've got a marketing background. Then went across and arrived in Cornwall and had to sort out a marketing strategy for the largest firm of solicitors in Cornwall. Fortunately for me, their mission statement was being part of the community of which we serve. So as their marketing strategy, that was embedded in everything that we did. So yes, it gave me the content for the marketing, but my goodness, I hadn't thought about the impact on HR. So we actually had people wanting to come and work for us. We were working with schools, etc., way before social value was a thing. That's how old I am. Way before CSR was a thing. It was just the right thing to do. And often when I speak, I'll talk about doing good is good for business. So just to put that in context. I think what's really important today is, as we were saying, however big your company, whatever sector you're working in, you have to be honest, transparent, and have your ethics in place. And often I say that starts inwardly looking at your social responsibility and then translate it across in terms of what your social value is. And the reason for that, everybody's welded to a mobile phone. You can spend a lot of money building up a brand, but if you pollute the rivers, if you treat your staff badly, that bad news gets out quick. So from a risk perspective, it's important. But of course, procurement now, as I know you've been listening to this morning, very, very important. Wherever you are in a supply chain, you need to make sure that you're credible and ethical. So it's very, very important. So having worked in Cornwall, I came back here. I've worked with various companies. But I set up on my own in 2012 when the Social Value Act was brought in. And I suddenly thought, actually, people are going to need me because I've always worked in this space. I know how to put good business sense in place. Social value is not just about ticking a box. Actually, if you do the right thing, it's great for your business. You know, people say, oh, got to do some volunteering. Well, guess what? If you're head of HR and you've got challenges within your team building, raising people's aspirations and making people feel happier, learning new skills, communication skills, all of those things can be embedded in volunteering. So it's really important. I'm getting there, Sarah. So, Social Value Ideas Factory, I had been working for a big construction company and I learned a lot. So I've worked in charity, I've worked in the private sector, and I've worked with a big construction company and worked with public sector. And I hope everybody in the room agrees with me, but I'm certainly tired of working in silos. We have private sector on one side, we've got public sector on the other side, and we've got the charities. And it was like, hang on a minute, there's 3 massive projects in this county right now. We need to cut across those sectors and all work together, avoid duplication, make the biggest impact we can. And that was the foundation just about a year ago when we had our very first meeting with about 10 people in a closed room across sector and said, this is a massive opportunity for Gloucestershire. And how can we all work together to maximise the impact and make our communities, better places to live? And that was the seed. And here we are, roll on, 1 year on. And we've been doing a lot of research. We've had some group sessions with all sectors in place. We've had a session for private sector and we've had a session for public sector. We've now collated, and charities, and we've collated all of that information. And we're now in a situation where we can say everybody, without exception, thinks this is a good idea. We need to work together. We need to maximise the impact. And aren't we lucky that Gloucestershire's got this opportunity? So that's a long-winded way of saying why Social Value Ideas Factory was created, but it's a passion of mine that we just got to have some cross-sector thinking.
So really its role is to bring those conversations together and that collaboration.
Absolutely.
Great. We do need it for sure. I'd like to just bring in a couple of perspectives from our guests who are directly involved in delivering some of these social value projects and partnerships. And Jack, I wonder if I can come to you first. As a major developer, infrastructure project developer, what's the role that you can play at Henry Boot and others in creating the long-term social value that's beyond perhaps contractual obligations? How do you see that? What's the role that you really are there to play?
So I think we've got this really interesting challenge with Golden Valley because Golden Valley is a landmark scheme, not just for Cheltenham and Gloucestershire, for our business as well. This is a huge, huge development, and we're a 140-year-old company. We're very, very excited about this project. It's a cutting-edge project. I think the challenge we're trying to navigate, and it's a really exciting one, is that we've got to get a really careful balance between interesting and engaging the community on the short-term opportunities. We're going to be spending the next 10 years building out Golden Valley. We've literally just put spades in the ground. We're going after a long time kind of talking about it. So we don't want to lose that momentum. We don't want to lose the kind of excitement that local residents or children in schools might feel about being part of that process of actually building this scheme. But at the same time, we should never forget what Golden Valley is going to be when it's built. And that is a centre of complete innovation. And, we want children, primary school children, to be looking at this and going, I could work there one day. And actually then what we need to do is lay the infrastructure with experts and partners locally to make sure they get the pathways to come and work at Golden Valley, to kind of that see it, be it type mentality where we need to make sure they've got the confidence, the aspiration and the encouragement that we want them to go through their academic career and end up in really meaningful kind of solid employment. So the way we do that is constantly build relationships and listen. And people like Claire have been invaluable in guiding us in terms of not just what's happening locally, but who we need to connect with and in turn then connect on to others. So for me, the key to success with all of this is relationships locally, understanding who's doing what and how we can support each other.
Yeah. Can I just chip in quickly, Sarah? Because I have to say, Jack, I've got to give you a shout out. Jack's one of the few people I know that's actually brought people together, sat in a room and listened. So thank you, Jack. Just wanted to put that out there for the record.
Great to hear. And also, I think one of the challenges is the long-term nature of programs such as Golden Valley, isn't it? That it's long-term conversations. It's not just a at the beginning or a statutory requirement. So yeah, that's really interesting about relationships for sure. Michaela, so in your role as the social consultant with Samtala, you're looking as an organisation both at national and local projects.
Yeah.
And my imagination is that there's often perhaps challenging conversations for businesses to marry stakeholder business and shareholder value, I guess,
Yeah.
and stakeholder and social value.
Yeah.
So how do you help them kind of balance or come to those resolutions?
So at Samtala, we believe that social value is good for commercial business, and the two shouldn't be siloed. One side being growth, but if you're thinking about social value, that's going to have an impact on growth. The two can coexist. And actually, like Claire's already mentioned, if it's embedded and you're doing social value, you're actually going to see the benefits for your organization. You're going to see the growth. You're going to do that internally and externally to your organization. So I think that's really, really important that we look at them together rather than thinking about this tension. But when it comes to kind of getting rid of some of that tension, I think there's a couple areas really. First is language. And I think that's whether that's within the public sector, within the charity sector, within our own sector, there's a slight confusion around social value and what it means. And especially internal in a large organization, when you're thinking at that board level, you have to think about the language that you're using. When you're thinking about those SLT members, they're thinking about strategy, they're thinking about growth. So maybe it's thinking about social value in a slightly different way. So instead of saying, we want to go and do this project in the community, it's actually saying, let's look at your growth. If you're doing this, you've then got examples to go into your bids, which means you're going to win more bids, which is going to create that growth for your organization. So I think sometimes it's just about the language we're using at the different levels. So I think that's really important. And the second thing, and I think across the panel we have been mentioning it, it's embedding it in your organization. And especially at Samtala, sometimes that's doing it on the other side. You start out with the client, working with them on their bids through procurement, but once they see the effects it has, it's then we can support them to start embedding it throughout the whole of their organization and it becoming a golden thread through their organization. So I think that's really important as well, that you're looking internally and embedding it in your organization.
Excellent, of course. And I'm really interested, Paloma, also from a smaller business perspective, because these projects and social value is not just about the giants. It's a collaboration that is already coming across, collaboration between small businesses, community groups, charities. How can we engage in social value, do you think, better as smaller businesses?
I think it's a really interesting question. I mean, I think to some extent, and I think Michaela touched on it with her example of her friend, which is that actually, I think a lot of people are engaged with social value, but they don't necessarily have the language to identify it. So I definitely think that there is support to be given in helping people understand the things which perhaps they are doing implicitly, which they are not identifying, and then helping them gain confidence or pathways to scaling that. Because if they're already doing it implicitly, if they're already just doing the right thing, then actually having structured thinking about how to develop that organizationally can be incredibly valuable. Now, we're a small business. Like we started 5 years ago. Patch Gloucester is our sixth space. So we've been, I've sort of lived this journey over the last couple of years, and we, by the way, don't have anyone yet in our company, although we'd like to get there, who is explicitly leading on like impact or social value work, because as many small companies experience, we don't have the resources yet for an individual role. That means I think that embeddedness becomes more important, and I'm very confident that's part of the daily way they operate. But actually, Jake asked a question earlier, he said, why did you choose to become a B Corp? And we became B Corp because we knew that social value was embedded in how we were doing things, but actually we ourselves did not have the exact language or frameworks to know, A, how to structure it, maybe B, structure it in a way that we could kind of have some sort of process or framework that we could help scale as we grow, and then also probably have a way of communicating that externally. So, and I know there's like lots of debate about what are the best or the preferred ESG frameworks. But as I said to Jake, we said, for better and worse, like B Corp is an organization that a lot of very smart people have been engaged with, trying to work out good ways of measuring and creating frameworks around impact activity. So let's take that as our starting point, and begin and pathways through which to articulate and develop our own kind of approaches.
Great. Claire, would you like to add to that?
Well, I think as well, for those of you who are sitting in the audience today thinking this isn't relevant to me, I always pull people back and say that in the new world, it's about triple bottom line. So if you give equal emphasis, if you think of a stool with 3 legs, one leg is about taking care of people, one's the planet, and that will equate in profit. So whatever size of business, hold that true to the way that you operate your business. And the second thing, as I know my fellow panelists will agree with, is that whatever size of business, whatever sector you're in, if you list the challenges that you're currently facing, it's not about throwing money to address those problems. You can address them differently. And I'm just going to give you an example. So if you've got, if you listed your challenges, it's mostly around HR or marketing. It might be staff morale is low, or you haven't got good content for your marketing, and you're the best story teller there is, Sarah. But how can you do that? Well, actually, what a great way to start that conversation with your staff. Listen to your staff. They live locally. They're all engaged with various good projects. What is it that they collectively want to do? Because if staff morale is low, go and approach a worthy charity and talk about how you can volunteer. That ticks a lot of business boxes. It's not just about meeting a Tom's criteria. There is a really good business benefit for doing that. So it's just thinking outside the box and just being a little bit more creative.
And also, I guess, moving on from there, when there's so much opportunity to become involved in supporting projects in our local communities. We were at the Cheltenham's Chamber of Commerce networking last night and had a great talk from Talitha Nelson from Gloucestershire Community Foundations, just reminding us how many community groups and organisations there are across the county. So I guess it leads me to the question of how do we try and coordinate the impacts that we're having? So when we're thinking about shaping and delivering and the impact that we can have as businesses, working with charities and community groups, how can we help coordinate? Is that part of the role of Social Value Ideas Factory to do that?
Use your microphone, Claire. Yes, it is. And I think we've got the Gloucestershire Voluntary Sector Alliance. We've got Gloucestershire Community Foundation. They're right at the sharp edge. When I was in a previous role, I read a document and it said Gloucestershire's a very affluent county. So I kicked back and said, well, that's interesting. So I'm a trustee of Gloucestershire Community Foundation. How come 1/3 of our children are living in poverty? Silence. So having that local knowledge, and this is why I commend Jack in every bit of the good work that he's doing, listening gets you to understand. So it's not about ticking a Tom's box. It's about truly understanding what the need is locally and then being able to understand how best to meet those needs and work effectively. Because I'm sorry, and if there's anybody here that's a big advocate of Tom's as a measuring system, themes, outcomes and measurements, it's very limiting. And I talked to a charity yesterday, and the bit that broke my heart is the charity. They're working hard. They're putting bids out there. They have to pay £6,000 to have access to the Tom software. And they're nearly in tears on the Teams call going, we could use that for real. We could employ somebody to do more good stuff. Because what tends to happen in this space, it's all about, and you alluded to that at the very first time you spoke, Jack, it's all about the statistics and the figures and all of us that are sitting on this panel here, we do it because we know it's the right thing to do. It's not about those statistics. And every county is different. You know, we've got unique needs in Gloucestershire. You can't have one size fits all. So I think that's important to remember.
Absolutely. I'm sure we'll keep returning to that. Sorry, did you want to add something, Michaela?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that as well. I think it's also that responsibility for the businesses, for the public sector, to provide the platform and the spaces for the SMEs and the VCSE sectors to actually be aware of the opportunities that are out there, and to hear their needs. It sounds like you're doing an amazing job, and that's the start until Together Gloucestershire. So it's moving in the right direction in the county, but I think those spaces and those platforms need to be made available for them as well to help them get involved with it.
Absolutely. I just want to move on and talk a little bit about, you just mentioned measurement. And we understand that as businesses, we're having to, show those we're working with and for the impacts of what we're doing. So can I just ask those of you that are, you're all doing this, what are the sensible ways for us to be able to measure our impact when we're talking about social value?
Yeah, no, happy to come in on that one. But just before I do, just to kind of wrap up that final point, which was the pitfall I think any big developer like HBD could make coming into an area like Gloucestershire is to think we should parachute in and try and do lots of new stuff. This area is so rich with innovators, community stakeholders doing really great work. Actually, the real challenge for us is just to try and soak it all up and work out who's doing what and how we can support them, because that's, if we can give momentum to existing initiatives, that's far more effective than trying to do lots of new stuff. In terms of measurement, look, I think it's about getting the balance right. You can't be credible if you can't back it up with data, but you're not credible if you only back it up with data. So I think I mentioned on the panel earlier, we're very much intending to publicise our social value plan for the first phase of Golden Valley, and that means that people locally will have in writing our commitments. They can hold our feet to the fire. They can see what we've said we'll do. And in terms of measuring that, we will work really closely with Cheltenham Borough Council, who are very ambitious on social value, to make sure that we are on a routine basis going back to them, not only to measure progress, but also to identify any challenges or actual opportunities. These things shouldn't be static. That plan should evolve over time. As importantly, though, more importantly in many ways, is anecdotal feedback from local people. And that's why we mention, and lots of people mention bringing people together. Golden Valley, we don't want the project to just directly do, we want it to connect. So actually kind of hosting events, we've recently hosted our first community leaders event. We'll be doing that 3 or 4 times a year, because we want not only to let people know what we're up to and keep them engaged, we want their feedback. We want the genuine, what's going well, what's not going well, how can we all do this better together? And I think if we can measure that, not in a, we don't want to kind of write down all those comments on a spreadsheet. And it's about the human connection of going, are we getting this right? And if we can feed that back and we can feel like we're getting that real honest feedback from local people, I think we're onto a winner.
Which allows you then to adapt and
Exactly
change
right.
as you grow.
Yeah, exactly right.
Michaela, love your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think I'm echoing exactly what you've just mentioned. I think it's, especially when you're looking at the Lifeline of projects, it's not just looking at those outputs, it's thinking about the so what. So you are gathering feedback throughout the whole process, but beyond, what is that legacy that you want to leave behind? Yeah, it's great saying that you've managed to create 3 work experience opportunities or 3 apprenticeships, but what happens after that? It's fantastic you were able to give someone work experience, but do you know what they've gone away, what they've taken, what skills have they used? So it's looking beyond just that project. I think that's really important, to really get that qualitative data that you can then analyze, see what's working. As you said, you're going back to your buyer, you're talking them through what are the challenges, what's going well. So for me, I think that's just really important. And it's also at that planning stage as well, going back to the so what. When you're working with delivery partners as well, like there's a lot of these VCSEs out there that have got great tools that they're already using, which will, look at confidence levels, or they will look at a lot of different metrics out there. And I think it's really understanding what is it that you're doing, why you're doing it, and working with your delivery partners to understand what data you can get. So it is really that quality rather than just the numbers and the output.
Can I just add one more thing, which is that with social value, it's not just us measuring our own progress. It's thinking about how the local communities across the region are measuring us as well. So just a really small recent, but we're doing a lot of work with the local community centres in Hester's Way and then hopefully increasingly Springbank as well. we're putting in place Golden Valley notice boards in the centre so that we can share construction updates and job opportunities to where local people are. They can access that information. It's a really small thing, but they just said we'd plan to do that in the centres only, and then they said no, actually put some information outside, because not everyone will walk through the doors, but lots of people will walk past here, and we've done that. So sometimes it's just those really small things that show people they've been listened to. That can go a long way in terms of community perception, I think.
Yeah, great example. So from your experience collectively on the panel, how do you say, what are the barriers that we're facing currently? What are the barriers that are making it perhaps a little bit more difficult for the collaborations to take place effectively for social value? And of course, how might the Social Value Ideas Factory help that? So Claire, do you want to kick us off?
I'll just kick us off on that, because the Social Value Ideas Factory, as I said, was about cross-sector thinking and cross-sector working, very, very important. But also it's being honest. Certainly when I was on the other side of the fence working for a private sector business, crazy. I turned up at a school, an SEN school that had 40 students, went in and said, we're here, we're going to be your saviours, we're going to work with your pupils, we're going to inspire them to think about STEM subjects, and we've got jobs that we're going to need filling. And they went, we've got 3 other construction companies working for us. They'd only got 40 students, yet they were next door to a comprehensive that had 1,800 students, who definitely had SEN students in there, but they were getting no support at all. That seemed crazy to me. The second thing was I was approached by a charity. I think a lot of charities think, oh, social value, that's money. It's not about money. If you're actually in that space, it's about what you can save a charity with. Can we help you with your pro bono? Do you need a marketing strategy done? Do you need materials? What is it that we can practically do to save you money? So I often used to say, give me a wish list and we'll work with that wish list and see how we can support you. Second thing, a charity came to me and said, we really need an electrician. And I went back to the head offices out of county and said, have you got any electricians? No, we haven't. 2 weeks later, those of you in the room who know Jeanette Vizard, she's absolute legend. She helped 650 charities last year, Bromford flagship. And she said, we've got an electrician, we can help. And I thought, well, that's crazy. We've got all of these people flitting around individually in this county. Some live here, some don't. But how can we share that knowledge, share the love, and make as much impact as we possibly can as a collective? So that's one of the aims of Social Value Ideas Factory. And it is about language. And people who've heard me speak before, businesses used to be shy of charities. Oh, God, they're going to ask me for money. I'm going to steer away from them, actually physically walk away from a charity. I'm now saying, actually, you need to work with charities. You need long-term partnerships, not just go away money. So how can you identify what's in it for both sides? If it's not working for both sides, don't start working together, because if it doesn't fit, it's a hiding to nothing. So it's having that honesty from that first conversation. And I think that's, Jack, what's really impressive with what you're doing. You're really understanding that landscape and you know what fits and how best to support.
Sorry.
Yes, go.
But I think that's so, there's never going to be a one size fits all approach. And I think it's really exciting. There's opportunity to just keep experimenting and keep testing and keep developing a whole culture of different formats. So I just thought, one example that I came across recently around a group that kind of looks at sort of social urban projects is called a collaboratory. And so everyone comes and brings their ideas. And so I've got this project. I'm working on an idea to, increase local food production, and presents a plan and says, who in this room, who in this group can help me, not with money, like who can make a commitment during the session to hours of support with X, Y, or Z. And I was like, and everyone around and presented a project, and people made commitments. And at the end of the session, the follow-up was the commitments that each of the projects had received. And I thought that's so interesting. Like I've seen lots of different ways of delivering projects, and that's a format that I'm not familiar with. And as you're talking, I was thinking, well, maybe that's an exciting thing for the Social Ideas Factory. And actually I think that is just like, what are the different ways of getting worthwhile projects, ambitions, initiatives, ideas in front of new audiences and getting the support that people actually want in order to help deliver them.
Definitely. Yeah. And it is a challenge around language. I've worked in every sector, and charities frame things in one way, and it's not always. I did a whole course in France with social entrepreneurs, and it was great. I took with me the marketing director of the Eden Project, great social enterprise, and I took along the social value lead for Kier Construction. So we went to France. We had a room full of English and French social entrepreneurs in the room, and I laugh because David Manier, who's now back in the role of marketing director for Eden, he stood up and he said, "You're not going to like this. You're a social entrepreneur because you set your business up with a social purpose, but you still have to make money." And you could hear that, "Oh, money, that's a dirty word." No, it's not. If you want a sustainable business model, that's how it works. And then Kier Construction, Gareth Borton stood up and he said, and he did his very tight tie and his suit and his comb over, and he said, the elephant in the room is you don't trust me and I don't understand you. So that's the starting point. But I need to work with you. I need to put in all this great stuff. He was way ahead of the curve. He realized that a lot of their staff were over 50 years old. They needed a pipeline of new blood in to train them up. So he was working with ex-offenders to give them opportunities to upskill them to get them into working with Kier Construction. Genius. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, I think it's making sure that everyone knows what the needs are. And especially a lot of the SMEs, social enterprises, the charity sector, they're experts on the ground. So I think, when we're coming forward with these initiatives, we need to be having those discussions right at the start. And that's part of what I do in my role as partnerships lead. So when we're working with clients, and we're looking at solutioning at that bid phase, or if they're just embedding it within the organization, it's actually, I go out and do a lot of research, understand the areas, go and speak to some of those SMEs, social enterprises, VCSEs in the area, and understand their needs. Understand what are you experts in. We don't want to try and bend what you're doing because you have got limited resources as well. But what is your need? This is our need. How can we align? And that's how you're going to make sure those barriers are broken down and that it's actually really successful.
And I think building on that, I mean, my background is in architecture and design, and I designing cultural spaces and social impact projects. And so I've been on the receiving end of, big companies, CSR schemes. And what I felt through my own experience with that was actually when it doesn't make sense is when it feels tokenistic, when it's designed as a one-off experience. So I think at one point we did a community space in Hackney, and we had a team from Bank of America down for a day to help us with painting. It's like, these guys don't know how to paint. What are they doing here? They've got real skills and expertise that would probably be infinitely more valuable and authentic to what they actually do. But this is not valuable to us. And I actually think I think there's so much more to be gained by an organization saying what is our skill set and expertise, and actually that being the thing which you lend authentically to other companies or projects or initiatives who need that support.
But I think there's a theme that's really emerging here, isn't there, around perception? I think lots of SMEs at the moment who are procuring and having to kind of think about social value, it must feel like another burden in an already quite a state of a lot of pressure. I think we're trying to really help SMEs and social enterprises and encourage them to see themselves as partners and to see this as an opportunity. And you might think, well, but if we have to do more, how is that an opportunity? To your point earlier, such a valid point. SMEs have been doing this for hundreds of years. This isn't new. It's just badged up differently. Yeah. And yes, there may be kind of different parameters to it, but it's about understanding the impact you're already having on your community. And guess what? If you're an SME, chances are you're employing local people, you're working with local children, you're already doing a lot of the doing. The challenge, I think, for us as a developer with a scheme like Golden Valley, because it's so big, is that we've got to be very careful that we don't try and present it as kind of it will solve all social ills. And, even though it is a large scheme, we have to be kind of conscious of resource. So what we're trying to do is balance the messaging of we are open to work with anybody who wants to work with us, and we're really keen to do that. But we've got to be very, very careful that we don't end up trying to do 1,000 things not very well. So what we're kind of very clear on is that we're going to work with some really kind of focused partnerships. We are naturally going to focus a lot of our attention on the immediate neighbourhoods so that they feel very much kind of connected to the scheme. But we are always going to have an open door to any organisation across Cheltenham, Gloucestershire and the wider Southwest that wants to work with us. What we just don't want to do is overpromise and underdeliver. So we do want to have kind of clear focused partnerships with really clear ambition, and then, like I say, that kind of sense of being open and willing to work with anyone who wants to come and be a partner.
That's the invitation to all of us.
Yeah.
Right here, right now. So we've talked about language, we've talked about projects, delivery, measurable outputs, and that can feel a bit impersonal, can't it? And actually, how can we make sure that we don't lose sight of the human impacts, the personal impacts that we're creating through social value? What it's really all about is how it's experienced by people. How can we, through the language, through the way that we talk about it, how can we make sure that people's experience is at the heart of that? I'm wondering, Michaela, can I ask you?
Yeah, and I think we've echoed a lot on this panel today. I think a lot of it is about, first of all, it's doing that stakeholder mapping. I think it's understanding wherever your project is based, is understanding who the stakeholders are. Is that the other local businesses in the area? Is it the local residents in the area? And all of these are stakeholders. It's your employees, and it's really understanding their needs. Everyone will value completely different things, but what are some of those key things that are kind of echoing, and lean towards that? They're the ones on the ground. They know the community. So it's really about, speaking with your stakeholders and really understanding what is the need out there and leaning towards that, and then start creating from there. There's no point coming in and saying, we're going to come and solve all of this. We think this is what the community needs. I think it's starting, they're the heart of everything. And that's where you need to start. You need to start with the stakeholders.
Claire, I'd love you to add to that, because I know you're a great storyteller.
I have a great story for you. You knew I would. So many years ago when I was in Cornwall, I was working for Cornwall Community Foundation before Social Value, and they were building the Space Centre at Newquay Airport. And everybody was crowing about the fact they were going to have this amazing centre, space centre. And I expect some of you remember it was a failure. But anyway, they were very excited about it. And I was the only person in the room that put my hand up and said, this is going to be completed in 10, 15 years' time. Are you talking to the schools? Are you raising aspiration? Cornwall, people see the very, very beautiful picture frame, but the centre of Cornwall is one of the most depressed areas in Europe. And I said, those children in those most depressed areas, we need to raise their aspirations and make them realise they could get a job here. How do we encourage them to get into the STEM subjects? Because what's going to happen? You're not going to engage with the children. Those children are not going to be fit and ready to take those jobs. So what are you going to do? You're going to be bringing people in from the rest of the UK and around the world. They're going to come in, they're going to gobble up all these high-paid jobs, and guess what? House prices are going to go up even more. This is not right. And so all those years ago, I think that was one of the things that I recognised then. If we can raise aspiration, the skills can be added on, but you've got to have the right aptitude and attitude of these children. So again, when you're thinking about putting careers events on, make sure you bring the whole family together. When I was in Cornwall, it was 3rd generation unemployed. So yeah, great, tick a box, put a careers event on, but bring the families. So the entire family are on that path of aspiration to pull themselves out of a very challenged way of living. And I think that's so important, because I'd hear, little Johnny would come along and you inspire them and you'd say all about these opportunities, and then they go home and mum and dad and the grandparents go, you're never going to be an architect. So let's start thinking about that, because it's really important.
I think that's such a critical point. And we were talking earlier this morning about meeting people where they are, and been flexible in your thinking. So we're going to do a lot of careers education on Golden Valley. That shouldn't just happen in schools. It should happen in the youth kind of provision, places like the Rock in Cheltenham. We're just due to sponsor Party in the Park in Cheltenham in August. Pittville Park, brilliant event run by No Child Left Behind. Would recommend it to anyone. We're going to have loads of kids going through. We've got a great challenge for them to do to kind of on that aspiration piece. But actually, it's a chance for us to speak to mum, dad, grandparents, carer to say, actually, do you know what our offer is? Do you know how we could support your children at school? That whole family approach, I think, is really important. Really important.
Absolutely. And I'd like to add, which I probably would from my background in PR and comms, is that it's the storytelling that's so important, because we need to, when we kind of hear the personal stories of how it feels to be involved, the difference that we might make to a family where the kid has their ideas ignited about a career aspiration that otherwise they might not have come across. That those are the things that when we hear them, we can understand, and we can relate it to our own families and our own experiences. And that's what's so powerful. So I think, we've already talked about the jargon that is so easy to fall into, but actually us talking about the real work and the real impacts is I think so important, and you're all doing that really well. So just let's look ahead to what success would look like for the Social Value Ideas Factory in maybe 3 to 5 years' time. What would you like to see? How will you know it's successful, Claire?
I think education's really important. So Social Value Ideas Factory is a great place to start. I would say something, but I'm being filmed, so I won't. But a lot of people think they know what social value is, but often don't. So we've got to do a lot of work around the education. We've got to get a lot of work understanding what the needs are specific to Gloucestershire, whether it's the council that is better at telling people when they come in to put a tender where that need is, to enable those tenders to be written accordingly to make the greatest impact in the greatest communities. And as I said from the start, it's having that open conversation across all the sectors to make sure that we work together for the common good of the county. We haven't touched upon Together Gloucestershire, so I will quickly mention it, as I know time is running out. Social Value Ideas Factory is exactly that. It's working cross-sector, it's understanding where the need is and understanding what we collectively can do to make a difference. Together Gloucestershire was created to think about local procurement. Some of you will have heard the conversation this morning, but there's something called the Preston model. And in Preston, they really pushed forward think local, buy local, and how that impacted on the local economy was amazing. So when I was working as a social value lead, 70% of their procurement had to be procured locally. I'm also on the board of Cheltenham Chamber of Commerce, and I know that the Chamber has a duty of care to all of those members, because guess what? They're local businesses. They want a slice of the pie. They didn't know how to get in front of heads of procurement. So that was the theory behind Together Gloucestershire. So some people are confused. What's the difference? Together Gloucestershire is about the procurement, and simply the procurement, to give those small businesses profile so they can go for those bids. And there's going to be Meet the Buyer events going forward. And obviously Social Values Ideas Factory, it's just, as I've said, it's working together to understand how we can make the greatest difference by giving our time, by volunteering, by pro bono, whatever, just what is the need, what can we do?
Brilliant, thank you. I'm just going to ask, we're going to wrap up from the questions from me so that we have time for some questions from our audience. But so to each of you, I'd love to ask if there was one thing that organisations could be doing to really get the most from social value in Gloucestershire. What would be the one thing you'd like to see them doing tomorrow, Jack?
Okay, so I think, generally speaking, I think we just need a bit of a change in perception. Social value is such an opportunity for this county. It is. And I think sometimes people, it's very kind of you, Claire, to say the kind words about the work we're doing, but don't forget that huge ambition from the council in Cheltenham on this project. They've from day one, social value has been absolutely top of the radar in the conversations we have with them. So we're bringing their vision to life. This is not something we're doing alone. I think changing the perception from, this is something not been done to us, but something we're good at, and it's something we bring to the table. And I can say, as I live in Sheffield, I work across the UK. Gloucestershire has got the most amazing community network. You punch above your weight. So I'm really encouraging you, be confident and be bold, because you're doing things here that some of the core cities aren't doing. You should be really, really proud of that. So I think just a change in perception. And the other thing I'd say is really invest in those relationships. Don't be afraid to go knocking on the doors of companies like HBD and saying, we want to work with you, because people do work with people. That's important.
Michaela.
I'm just going to flip on his head a little bit and look at it with my partnership hat on, and think about it from those SMEs, social enterprises, and the VCSEs. It's going back to that why and that so what. All of you have got something embedded in what you're doing, and it's that golden thread running through your organisation. And it's really thinking about that storytelling and it's how you're getting it out there. You are doing social value, and it's just really about how you're telling that story and letting people know about the work that you can do, so you can get involved with it as well.
I suppose one thing that I really believe in is multidisciplinary approaches to getting ambitious things done. I think we can achieve so much more when we work with people beyond our own professional silos across different areas of expertise. And that for me is like deliberately why a place like Patch isn't designed for people from one particular sector. Obviously, other organizations like universities are a really good example of that. But I always say to people, I think the opportunity often comes, particularly if you've got an idea but you're not quite sure what that next step is, when you kind of look beyond your immediate community and say, who else can I reach out to, and actually ask for help. Because if you have a vision, if you have an exciting social vision, and if you've got a way of articulating that, and you start sharing that, I think you will find people who want to join you on that journey.
And I think this is a good time to actually mention the fact that we're now going to be a unitary council, because originally one of the challenges we had as Social Value Ideas Factory was there's no consistency. So we had all these various councils. There weren't people in senior roles responsible for social value. They all did things differently. So I'm looking upon that, looking forward, as an opportunity for us that we can have some consistency.
Absolutely. And let's just wrap up by asking, how do people get in touch, find out more about Social Value Ideas Factory? What's happening next? What's the best way to stay in touch?
Well, it's literally a year ago since we had a closed-door conversation at Gloucestershire Business Show. Some of you were here. We're in that room. Thank you very much. And it's grown from 15 people. It's now we've got 50, 60 people on our database, all keen to continue the work. So we had 2 general conversations. We then had one sector-specific with the private sector. We had one with charities. And last week, it was with the public sector. So we've done the research. We've gathered up what are the barriers, what are the challenges, what's the vision, where can we be? So we will be doing a presentation, and all of you, if you follow me on LinkedIn, so it's Claire Thayers, Thayers, you'll see what's going on and you can learn about what's going on. And yeah, we want to hear from all of you. So if you've got thoughts or ideas of what the barriers and challenges are that you faced, whether you're charity, private sector or public sector, feed them through to me and we can put them into the mix.
Thank you. So over to you. Are there any questions you'd like to ask the panel? And if you can just wait for the microphone to come to you, that would be great. Thank you. You let us know who you are, where you're from. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Jim Jones from Passion First Aid. Corporate social responsibility. It's a big thing for me, supporting local communities. Do you look at it as just one business or a group of businesses working together for that? That's my first point.
Good
to you.
Good question.
Or companies working together in the locality?
I think collaboration is absolutely critical, Jim. We can all bring different things to the table, but no one business has the skill sets or capacity to solve these really knotty challenges alone. You know, we've talked today across different panels about topics ranging from homelessness to reducing young people falling out of education, employment and training. None of us can do that alone. We can all bring different things to the table. And actually having that local knowledge and expertise backed up by organisations coming in with resource and ideas from outside the area, if you can get those 2 things working together, you're going to go so much further than trying to do it on your own.
Because I'd love the opportunity to present to the panel. Obviously, we deliver a lot of first aid training, but it was corporate and to local communities. So there's a link there. It's like, could I ask where your nearest defibrillator is?
Oh, good question.
Yes. In reception. So could I ask why it's not outside? Public access? Fantastic. But that's the sort of thing I'm looking to work with businesses to do, to give some community resilience in emergencies at times of need. So if they buy a defibrillator, put it outside their property, not inside at reception. And I'd say I really appreciate the opportunity to meet with you, discuss how we can do that, support young people in schools, deliver training to older students who are leaving in sixth form to take qualifications to the workplace that will be recognised, and so on. So if that's possible, I'd really appreciate it.
I'd really recommend you and anyone else, Jim, It's a two-way street in the sense that I think there's lots of people willing and wanting to partner. I think if you're an organisation that's keen to do that, do join up to the newsletters from the Chamber and Together Gloucestershire and Golden Valley and Patch and whoever else, because we're desperate to share information and opportunities. And the more, we'll do that in a whole number of ways, but the more dialogue we have with local businesses like yours and local organisations, the more likely we are to share that information and work together. So do be proactive in going out and seeking those opportunities.
I think that's enough.
Sure you do.
I think that's a really nice point. I actually meant to build on something I was thinking of earlier when I mentioned B Corp, because actually the question at the time had been, what does it mean to be like a small business trying to look for approaches? And actually, I think the very powerful thing about B Corp and what you're articulating with Social Ideas Factory, and hopefully with places like Patch and there are many other examples across Gloucestershire, is it's about community and actually like. B Corp for us is a community that we are part of as an organisation to help us on our social impact journey. And that gives us confidence and it gives us visibility. But by being part of that community, we can also become our own kind of wave our own flag to say this is something that we care about, and hopefully be a convening place for other people who care about B Corp also. And that's just one example of how I think there's like multiple communities that we can all be taking more active roles in, and I just kind of want to kind of second that point, because I just think like showing up and participating is really the first step. And yeah, please always feel free to reach out. Laura leads our space here, so she's in the space every day. Part of her job is to help join the dots locally, and so she always has a very open door for conversations and ideas.
Can we just move to another question, actually? I know we're a bit short of time. And maybe it'll cover some of the things, Michaela, that you're asking. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name's Jo. I'm doing some work at the moment with Bourneside Sports Centre in Cheltenham. So it's a question for Jack, really. Possibly not for now, but a direct contact for who to contact.
Me.
To work right.
Yeah, no, like I said, hopefully got across earlier. A big part of what we're trying to do is be really visible about. Actually, it's not just an info at kind of email address. It's Jack.
Okay,
and you can reach out to me. We are working really proactively in those parts of Cheltenham as well, and I schools like Belmont and Bourneville. These are the schools already doing amazing things. We're not trying to kind of come in and try and reinvent what they're doing. We're trying to kind of add value to what they're already doing. So we keep to talk.
We have 3,000 people coming through every week.
Yeah.
So it's
great
really
to chat.
Useful.
Let's
Thank
do that.
you.
I think we might have one more question over here. Hi. Oh, two questions over there.
Hi, Dave Morris, Director of Zentano. We're a leadership development business. I think there's a lot of very well-intentioned people at senior level in businesses, SMEs and bigger, who want to do this stuff, but they never get out of their day-to-day operational head down. We're all here because we've taken time out of our businesses to be here for a reason. And I remember, if you like a good story, a few years ago, I was out in Malvern looking for a networking event. I got completely lost, wandering around Malvern, and met another guy who was completely lost, who was a chief exec of a charity. And we were looking to do some work for a charity, and it was a homeless hostel in Worcester that he headed up. Amazing work he was doing. So I offered to do work for him, not to tick a box, we don't do bids, so it wasn't to win a bid. It was, as Claire said, it's the right thing to do. But the richness I got from that was amazing in terms of what we could do for him, what I learned from interacting with him, but only because you get out of your office. And so what can we do to get more people who need to hear this stuff to events like this? And because the more we get them out, we can start to really spread this up wide.
Just to wearing my Cheltenham Chamber hat, that's something that we want to do once a year, if not twice a year, where we create a space so that charities and businesses can come together. In the old days, as I said, a lot of businesses ran away from charities. They were too scared because they were going to be asked for money. And some of you may remember, I did something called Gloucestershire Forwards with Gloucester Rugby, and every other month we did a breakfast, and I would stand up and I said, we're not here to shake buckets, and we're not here to sell anything. We're here to create a space for charities and businesses to talk. So I want to reinvent that and get that going again, because there isn't any. We've got a lot of networking, but again, it's back into those silos. And everything starts with a conversation. So how can we create those spaces for those conversations to start? And that's for Gloucestershire.
So there's two things that I was going to mention here. One, I think it's every organisation at the SOT level, there'll be some type of pain point, there'll be a pinch point, and you can feed it back into what we're doing and what we're doing here. And I think it's about that language, which I mentioned earlier, and how you're speaking about it. Because I had this conversation with this great organisation called Board of Education, and this organisation at Cymrealis, they seen that there was a gap with STEM skills, and they were like, what can we do about this? So from having a discussion with Board of Education, they actually got some, and at the SLT level, to volunteer on boards, so that actually they are working from the inside out. So they're going on boards at schools, and they're actually starting to look at how they can embed STEM into the curriculum, and not just the general one that's in curriculum, looking beyond that. And it's been so successful that's now rolled out so that any organisation looking to improve those skills, they can use their expertise, go into boards, help them, but they're also learning as well. And I think that's a big part of it. It's sometimes that educational piece and actually understanding whether you're a board of a school or you go in and be a board of a charity. It's sometimes you're removed from that day to day. So actually getting yourself involved and taking that time, you can give your expertise, but actually you're starting to understand what are some of those issues going on. And it will feed back in, honestly, it will feed back into your business. So yeah.
Yeah, I really echo that. And don't be hard on yourself. Like, it's an incredibly hard time to run a business at the moment. There's a lot of pressure, but it can also be quite a lonely space to be sometimes. And I think the beauty of coming to events like this and investing that time is, it's just a great way to start conversations you might not normally have had. And all our best partnerships have started with a chat over a cup of coffee with someone.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We're just going to have to say goodbye and thank you to Paloma because she has a train to catch. But thank you so much for coming.
I don't think, Jack, I don't think it's the small, most of the networking.
So you're
when we go
big
networking,
businesses.
most of the businesses there are small businesses. Yeah,
So
it's the slightly bigger ones where they don't get out.
So I think for bigger businesses, what I would say is businesses spend an awful lot of money and time thinking about how they develop their staff. And beyond your L&D budget and, you know, people going on training courses, a big way to develop your staff is to get them to be curious. And, you know, I come to events like this now. I know some people today, don't know everybody, but actually I love coming to events like this because I have no idea who I'm going to meet and who I'm going to chat to. And I think having that curiosity, it makes me think differently about, you know, what we're doing and constantly testing your own assumptions. So your big businesses, I'd be saying, don't think development of staff only happens in the office. It happens in rooms like this, and it is a good time investment.
Brilliant point. Thank you. Great question too.
Hi, so Dan Smale from Fast Hosts Internet, but also as a trustee and a kind of ex-chairman of a charity here in the Southwest as well. I think the conversation, so thank you to all of you. It's a really important conversation for us to be having, and having spoken to, you know, Claire virtually before, you know, and like to Rupert and that online about social value, incredibly important. In organisations where perhaps when we haven't got the same kind of tender procurement kind of issues around kind of social value, so that doesn't kind of play into it. And the SLT get it, and we're local, and we know we want to do the right thing. Sometimes the challenge is about how to engage the younger members of the workforce. And I think Claire made a really good, important point earlier about that it doesn't feature in education, so they're not coming through the educational system understanding the importance of social value. How do we engage a generation like that? You know, we can provide corporately, we can provide as many opportunities to reach out and work with VCSE sectors as we possibly can, and all the great networking events allow us to do that. But how do we engage and infuse those younger people to actually make the leap?
Can I start with that one? And I think prior to coming into the social value world, I did work in the charity sector for 10 years. And I've worked for a lot of young people charities. And within the community, this generation that are coming up, they are doing it. It's what they believe in. And when they're looking for roles, they are looking for businesses that are B Corp or have those values that align to them. They are very clued on about the environment, and they are, they're really invested in sustainability. So I think actually getting involved and knowing those organizations, those VCSEs, those community groups that are working with young people, if you go into them and have conversations with them, some great ideas will come out of it, because a lot of these charities as well, especially with young people, the young people are at the heart of what they do. So they have advisory groups. So for example, the Music Works around the corner, they have youth advisory groups, which are advising the NHS, they're advising the public sector on things that are going on for young people in the county. So I think it's really important that you're engaging with those organisations that are working with young people, because there's some great ideas that's out there. So yeah.
I think probably two things. Make it fun. We had a brilliant challenge last week. Henry Boot 140 this year. So last week we did a 140-mile running challenge through the week over 4 days, 24 hours of running, people running. But it created so much fun atmosphere in the office, and you had everyone from the incoming CEO down to people in more junior roles running together, raising money for a good cause, good challenge. And we topped it off with kind of drinks in the office on the Friday evening. The camaraderie and morale that built, we couldn't have paid that. We could have tried to pay thousands of pounds for some kind of corporate team building event that wouldn't have touched the size of what that did last week. The other thing I'd say, though, is make it meaningful. We talked about volunteering earlier. We've done lots of volunteering in the past, and we've been guilty, like anyone, I think, sometimes of trying to think about the volume of what we're doing rather than the impact. And actually what I think young people really want to know is, how can I use my skills and my passions to best effect? And it means a huge amount, I think, for anyone, however senior they are in a business, to know I've just done something that's made a real difference for an organisation. And if your business can give them the time and headspace to do that, even if it's just a few hours a year, I think that will go a long way to staff retention and their experience of your culture.
Absolutely. And I think we're going to have to leave it there, actually. We're out of time, but thank you so much for your questions. And please do stay in touch.
Yes.
You've had an open invitation for them to stay in touch. But for today, I'd like to say thank you to the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To Patch for sponsoring the event and for hosting it so beautifully here.
Thank you.
To our audiences, and to the team at Business Insights Gloucestershire for putting today.
Okay.
Great,
Thank
thank you.
all.
And I just wanted to come in and say to all of you, our audience who stuck around and joined and what have you, thank you so much. It's really important that the Gloucestershire business community engages with this stuff. This is a whole brand new format for us, and we're working out as we go along, as much as you're coming to see what on earth is going on. But a big thank you to Sarah and to Claire and to Jack and, Michaela. I knew that, because I knew you'd swapped out late at the last minute and I couldn't get there fast enough. Thank you, Michaela. Without these guys, it wouldn't work anyway. And with each and every one of you, we've got a whole other sets of conversations going, and all of these things have a great life. Social value, I'm quite sure you've been talking a lot about the Social Value Ideas Factory. Claire here. Yeah, say no more. You'll have heard it all already. So thank you again, and thank you for joining us. Thank you to the panel, and indeed the guys behind me and everything. So thank you, one and all.
Thank you.
Excellent.